Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters, both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on and stay soulful. The Soulful Hunter podcast is also proudly presented by the Crazy Elk Company. Based out of the state of Washington with products made in America, they are providing solutions with gear to problems you didn't even know you had. Their tag wallet is one of those solutions, and I had the pleasure of using it on all of my hunts this last year, and it is now a mainstay in my kill kit. The tag wallet is a water-resistant zippered pouch that comes with its own reusable zip ties to safely and securely store your notch tag for quick and easy access. For more information, go to crazyelkcompany.com and use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. Be blessed, everyone, and as always, stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Chapter 3 of the Soulful Series with Tim Douglas of The Inspired Way. Hope you guys have been enjoying this series and are really getting a lot out of it, because I know as I am going through these conversations with Tim, it's really impacting my life and allowing me to inwardly reflect so that I can have that outward correction moving forward. Tim, thanks for joining us for another episode.
Yeah, man. Good to be back. Chapter 3. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah.
Some of the reviews that I've been hearing, people are getting some things out of this, which is exciting. And that's exactly one of the reasons why we put it together. But I think, for me, it is a reminder each week, something that we talk about, like, okay, how am I going to apply that this week to my life? Even if some of these things I'm already practicing, it's like even more so, how can I be more mindful of it?
Yeah,
So we can all get stuck in the rut of just doing, and which really dovetails well into our chapter 3 today and our topic today, which is margin and slowing down.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. It's funny, we're not making this a hunting topic podcast in this series. However, when it comes to hunting, some of the best advice I've ever heard is when you think you are going slow down even more. Because when it comes to nature and you trying to find or search after what you want, right? When you identify your target and your goal, there's often, if we are moving too quick to try to achieve, attain, capture, whatever you want to use that term in that pursuit, when we go too fast, we can trip over our own feet, cause a bigger mess or noise than we normally would. I mean, that's really why I find hunting to be such a great correlation to life lessons, because when it comes to that margin, it is so important that we may think that we have margin in our lives. We may think that we are slowing down, and in reality, we could even do a better job and step back and really address what is margin. So, Tim, why don't you go ahead and kick it off and give the listeners your definition of what you consider margin and slowing down?
Yeah, and I'll read a little bit from Dr. Richard Swanson, who really exemplifies the definition of margin. And this is how I would define it as well. When I read this, I was like, yes, this is a great illustration or picture or metaphor of margin in our life. But Dr. Richard Swanson writes in his book called Margin. Margin refers to the space on the edge of a paper where there is no text. And if we think about that in our world, it's like, where in our world, where in our day is there nothing?
Yeah.
And that would be the margin, right? It's like in our, in the rest of our day, it's like we create our schedule so packed where there's no margin at all. And he gives a deeper breakdown of that, and I would love to maybe dive into that sometime before we're done here. But that's my definition, real quick, is just creating space in my day, creating margin.
Yeah. I love that. Margin is, when you first hear about the word margin, you're like, what? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
And really that page reference is such a good idea. If you were to stare at a book and the words went from edge to edge, top to bottom, it would feel overwhelming. However, when we look at a book and we see that there is margin on either side of the letters and the words, it it without us like consciously knowing it, it subconsciously addresses our soul and
Yeah.
helps us be put at ease. You know, the concept of world peace, or that all people want in life is peace, well, a lot of that stems from the inability to provide margin in your life. And some people could call it healthy boundaries, but boundaries can go into different types of relationships.
Sure.
When we're talking margin, we're talking about you as an individual, not
Yeah.
just you in your relationships with other people, although it can also be the same thing.
100%.
So I love it. And once again, I already talked about how in hunting, we talk about when you want to slow down and immerse yourself, then sometimes you need to even go slower than what you really think. When it
Mm.
comes to margin, there's so often that people are like, okay, you know, I need to get this done. I need to get this done. I need to get this done. They have a list of their to-dos in the day, but I want to work out, but I want to make sure I'm good to my spouse. I want to make sure I have time for my children. I want to have time and they have all these wants. And when it comes to it, what want needs to be prioritized higher than others?
Yeah.
And it's a great question to ask yourself. With that inward reflection leads to outward correction, because if we aren't good in our own heart, if we aren't good in our own head, in our own soul, then we are not good for anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you said, what you say, this is what I heard. What you say yes to, you're saying no to something else.
Yes.
Right. And so if we're saying yes to all these things, we're saying no to margin. We're also saying no to health. He goes on to, Dr. Swanson goes on to break that down. Is like, when we have no margin or no space for leisure and rest and family and God and health, I mean, it just deteriorates, and I would say it deteriorates our soul, right? Because we're constantly just go, 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 go. And our culture, our society almost rewards that.
Yeah.
It's this reward system in our culture that says the busier you are, the more overextended you are, those are signs of importance.
Yes.
And but yet there's also signs of burnout
Yes.
as well. And one of the things that I love, he talks about the conditions of modern day living devour margin. And the conditions, so let's look at that real quick. Marginless is being 30 minutes late to a doctor's office because you are 20 minutes late out of out of your, I would say barbers, it says here hairdressers, because you were 10 minutes late dropping off the children at school because you ran out of gas 2 blocks from the gas station and you forgot your wallet. It's just compounding throughout the day. And I mean, man, it seems like there's days where they just compile upon themselves or implode so much that it's like, what gives? And really it's creating that space. And I had this conversation with a friend. It's like leaving those gaps between this appointment to this appointment that gives you that space to be flexible, to move, kind of like what you were saying. Like, you love the idea of our soul loves see the space, and because it allows us to move, it allows us to have freedom and not feel so constrained or overextended.
Right. Our soul is not a static shape, right? It
Mm,
is
yeah.
not just like this circle, square, whatever shape you want to call it. It doesn't have rigid edges. Our
Yeah.
soul is constantly pushing. Like imagine
Mm,
yourself being inside like I don't know, really a womb or like a giant balloon or bodysuit, and you're like pushing on the edges to feel, hey, where
yeah.
can I expand?
Expand.
Where do I have
Yeah.
room for growth? What can I do to increase my own self so that I can continue to grow? Because either we're getting better or we're getting worse, and either we're making gains or we're creating losses and it just continues to go on. One of the things that I love, and you bring up Dr. Swenson, he says margin is having breath left at the top of the stairs,
Yes.
money left at the end of the month, and
Mm,
sanity left at the end of adolescence. I am like, dude. Growing up in my household, by the way, all you listeners, I'm sure you'll get to hear the story at some point. It was a hot mess.
very soon.
It was a hot mess. And yeah, there were great times. Yes, there were good memories. But at the end of the day, what it bred in me was this my childhood removed margins. I
Mm,
didn't have margins in my childhood. And so
yeah.
everything just felt overwhelming. And the minute that one thing feels overwhelming is the minute that you stop action and you have inaction so that you can't have action
So
in
good.
other areas. And once
Yeah.
again, that domino effect just builds up. And so when I think about margin, I hated, and I don't use the word hate very often. I hated growing up in a house where we were the family that was always late to everything. And as simple as that is, where else is that being applied in your life?
Mm,
Right? So
yeah.
I went to a leadership training and they had the doors open exactly at the time in which you were supposed to enter. And if you were late, they caused everyone, and there's hundreds of people in this conference, to go back outside and to have discord about making sure that you are a man or a woman of your
Wow.
word and to
Yeah.
follow up with if you said that we are starting at 11 o'clock, then you will be present and ready at 11 o'clock, not showing up at 11 o'clock. And so there's this whole saying of like, well, if you're on time, you're late. And if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're early, you're on time. That is
Yeah.
true. And so at the end of the day, if it's you being let's just use the term lazy. If you're lazy in your own life and you're hitting that snooze button, what is that 5 minutes of snooze or eight
Mm,
minutes of snooze or 10 minutes of snooze doing to the rest of your day?
yeah.
Could you use that 10 minutes in a different area? Maybe it's your commute. Maybe it's your time to self focus and ground yourself and get in alignment. Maybe it's your prayer time. Maybe it's your time that you spend with your wife staring in your spouse's eyes
Mhm.
and making that connection with the soul, the time with your children, whatever it is. Did that 10 minutes of snooze benefit you more than you getting to have 10 minutes in your day to do whatever it is that you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that is so good. And I think thinking about it like that, as far as like, hitting the snooze or watching the extra episode or whatever it may be, we have to, there's a saying that Brendan Burchard always says, what you don't measure, you don't manage.
Mm,
And time is the same way. If we're not measuring out our time, if we're not scheduling out our day, then we're not managing it at all. And if we're not measuring margin, if we want to have less stress, less overwhelm, more time for our kids, more time to read the book, more time to work on, it's a hunting podcast, more time to work on, our bow or to, master our craft,
hmm
so to speak, right? If we want to have more time for that, then we have to schedule that in. We have to have enough margin in our day, schedule that stuff. And it sounds kind of weird and crazy, like, because I'm just usually fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy. I love to just say, hey, let's just roll with this stuff. But yeah, I'm learning too that a lot of that creates issues, where now you're just available to everyone
Yes.
and yet available for no one. Honestly,
Will
so
you say that again? Because that's super
yeah.
powerful. I want to hear that again.
Yeah, if I can remember it, it just kind of came out. But where you're available for everyone, but yet you're available for no one. And
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's like a jack of all trades, but an ace of none. You
yeah,
have time for everyone in the world, but when it comes time to the things that you need to finish, need to accomplish, or you want and you have a strong desire for, you can give to everybody else. But if you don't have margins in your own life starts developing its own struggles and potential pitfalls because we are not scheduling margin.
yeah, totally. And part of that is, we should probably transition into slowing down, because part of it is slowing down our day. It is, and I get it. We're all busy. We live in a very fast paced world, where everybody wants everything now. But one of the things in culture, in setting culture, like whether you're a leader or a businessman or a woman or whomever, even culture in your home, you're setting culture. You're whatever you allow, you set culture. Whatever you stop, you set culture. So, like, if you want a different culture for your life, you have to be in charge of setting it, slowing it down, and getting back in track where you need to be.
Yes, I gotta just jump in here because that is
Yeah,
such a
you
that
about
is
jumped out of your seat.
dude, that is such a powerful statement, and I really listeners, please listen to what I'm about to say because when I heard this, it rocked my world. So, Pete Carroll, the football coach for the Seattle Seahawks, back when he used to coach at USC, I heard him speak, and he said this. Either, and he was talking about coaching football at this time, but you take this and apply it to every aspect of your life, your parenting, your relationship with your marriage, your whatever.
Hmm.
He said, either you are coaching it that way or you are allowing it to happen.
Yeah,
So when it comes to your life, either you are creating your life the way it is or you're allowing it to happen. For me, that was like a stiff slap in the face, like, wake up, are you kidding me? And so when we look at our children and my parenting skills, and I want to be
hmm,
a good parent. So, how badly do I want to be a good parent? Because if I really want to be a good parent enough, I'm either parenting that way or I'm allowing it to
mm,
happen.
yeah,
And so,
yeah,
behaviors of my children, if it's a behavior I don't like, instead of jumping on the kid like, how could you? Blah blah blah. Which I've had these moments in my life, and I am working through them to become a better parent. That it's so easy for us to point the finger at other people, like my kid. He's a kindergartner. He wasn't paying attention in class. Well, I wasn't supervising him the way he needs to be supervised.
yeah,
So either I taught him to not pay attention in class or I allowed it to happen.
yeah.
And that was an example. And I was like, oh my gosh. So
Well,
that was so huge.
and to that point, it's like I was just in a group. I have a group of men that I do group coaching with on Monday nights, and one of the gentlemen had one of those moments with his kid, and the question that I asked was like, what was the day like prior, leading up to that moment? What were the moments leading up to that, right? Because it's not that act essentially, and typically it's usually what's going on before that. And so if the day is packed full and we're carrying that tension over into our other lives, and I think I may have mentioned it on here, is like release tension, set intention. Like, I'm just going to slow down, I'm going to pause. I'm going to create that margin, right? That space to where I'm not going to go from this meeting where I'm all fired up. I'm all, a lot of stress coming from this or whatever. It was a phone call, or maybe it was just an argument with our spouse or whatever. And I'm not going to take it out on my kids. I'm going to press pause. I'm going to create that little space of margin to release that tension. And then I'm going to set the intention of how I want to show up for my son, for my daughter, for my coworkers, for my team, whatever it may be. And so it's really that slowing down part. In the coaching world, we call it slow down to speed up. In the Navy SEAL world, it's slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? So there's that terminology there, but it's the same thing. It's slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
And more that we slow down, we do operate more efficiently than if we're just revved all the way tight, where we're just blowing up on everybody because we think that's a sign of importance, because we got to stay busy. We've got to stay overextended. We've got to do all these things and be all things to all people. And that's not true.
But we're not true. But we're not true to ourselves in that moment.
Exactly.
It's so
Exactly.
funny. Let's build off of like last week's rest and recovery talk,
Mm,
going into margin and slowing down. If we don't manage our own time and create margin for us to get enough rest, then we wake up and we then have more of a potential to hit the snooze button, or to then wake up in an attitude that is not grateful, that is not rested, that is not full of recovery and rejuvenated and ready to attack that day. And therefore, we then become grouchy. We're quick to snap at people. We're quick to say words that are sharp and hurtful, rather than being able to evaluate the situation, to take a step back, to see things for what they are, rather than quickly jumping to a conclusion and automatically pointing fingers and blaming fingers. Right? I heard a saying one time where it's like every time you point a finger at somebody else, you have three fingers
yeah.
pointed right back at you. And as silly as that sounds, if you really think about what does slowing down and margin do for your life, it allows you to not be so judgmental, because it
Mm.
gives you a perspective of everyone is really trying their best. And even remove the word trying. Everyone is just being who they are. And our job is to love people through things
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to continue to love them regardless of their circumstances. Love looks different in different
Mm.
aspects, but when it comes to slowing down, it allows us to enjoy what we have around us a lot more. When we don't get that opportunity, we're so quick and it's like things just fly by.
Well, and I would say, like when we think of slowing down to speed up, speed up in my mind, look at it or translate that into increase. We all want increase. We all want to be increase. It could be, when we slow down long enough, we increase our health, because when we stay busy, when we stay, marginless, we're just constantly, it's added stress to our bodies. And Dr. Bruce Lipton said once, Dr. Bruce Lipton is the godfather of epigenetics, and we won't go there, but he's the godfather of epigenetics. And he said, if people could see what stress does on the inside of their body when they stress, if you could see what goes on inside the body, we would never stress again. So, creating space in our day to just relieve some of that stress, how can it increase or speed up our health, our
Yeah.
our quality of time with our family, our quality of relationships with our friends, our relationship with God, our creator, because we're so busy that we don't even have time to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever to pray or to do a devotion. And I'm just as guilty. I've gotten, busy at times where I'm like, oh, I'm just too busy. Da, 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 da. And it's like, no, we need to create that space, slow down so that we can have increase, so we can speed up, so that we can have better relationships, better, time with those that we love.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to read a Bible verse right here. And I don't normally read Bible verses on this podcast, but this is one that I want to give some perspective to and share with it. And I think I know that it goes very well with our Soulful Series that we're talking about. It's Romans chapter 8, verse 5 and verse 6. So, and I read out of the King James version because that's what I love. And if a lot of people are like, well, it's difficult to read. It's like, well, if something's difficult, it's better for you. So growth is made through resistance. So there you go. Here we go. So Romans chapter 8, verse 5 and 6. It says, now we're going to put this in perspective as well for what we're talking about. It says, for they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh. Meaning that if you're just thinking about like everything you got to do, you're going to get caught up in everything that you have to do.
Yeah.
It says, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. Meaning, if we are slowing down and starting to go back to that chapter 1 of gratitude, chapter 2 of rest and recovery, and chapter 3 of margin and slowing down, if we go back to that, it allows us to, just like Cameron in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where when he was too close to the picture, all he saw was the dots, and that that wasn't beautiful. That wasn't art. It wasn't creative. When he stood back and he slowed down and he removed himself from what was going on, he could see the whole picture. The whole picture. So, but they that are after the Spirit are after the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, meaning that if you're only focused on everything that is constantly around you and is circling you and in your present moment, it's going to lead to death because you're going to tire out. You're going to burn your candle at both ends. You're going to get yourself into situations that are exhausting. And you're like, you know what? I don't want this anymore. And so it says to be carnally minded is death. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. And I don't know about you, but I know for my own personal self, I want life. I want life more abundant. I want peace. I want peace more abundant in my life. And it all starts with our ability to create margin, to slow down, to take a step back, schedule our day, prioritize the things that we want, what we don't want. Either we're teaching it, coaching it that way, or we're allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, baby, let's go. Let's go. Let's light this world on fire with the joy for the soul, for the spirit, for what God has given us.
And we can't do that when we're just wound so freaking tight, man. We just can't. I mean, we have those moments where we will fly off, right? Where, the wheel gets so wound up, so tight that it snaps. And so we can't live that way. We can't expect great things in our lives living marginless.
Yeah.
So we must have, the margin.
So beautiful. Tim, is there anything else you want to add to this for today? As your phone's blowing up and you got meetings after meetings going on.
Yeah. No, that was my dad calling in, and I said, "Hey, call you back." So, I would just encourage people to find, even if it's just, create, 5 minutes in their day to create some margin or just to slow down their day. I think I don't know if I mentioned it on here, but I'll have little triggers on my phone. Sometimes, I used to be really, really good at it. Here lately, my day is wide open. I have a lot of margin in my day. Some days, not so much, but like today, I was pretty open. So, but it's just triggers in my phone that says, "Hey, get outside, breathe." And it's just for 5 minutes. Just take some time to get outside and breathe and just have a moment outside away from everything else. And then so that I can come back to what I'm doing. So,
yes. Holding your breath is not margin.
yeah.
Holding your breath is a horrible feeling. And I find myself just in day-to-day life where I'm like, and maybe that is exaggerated right there, but if you really can reflect upon your own life, how often are you actually holding your breath?
Yeah.
And not breathing? It says in the book of Genesis that when God breathed into man, he became a living soul. So what is breathing going to do for us, and for us to have the time to evaluate whether or not we are breathing in.
Well, and I think it just adds more joy, in our life when we have room to breathe. When we have that margin, we have more joy
Yeah.
in our in our day. So
So, some tips that I just came off the top of my head for helping people with margin and slowing down. Number one, put your phone down. So I know that my wife gives me just a bunch of hard, I'm going to say hard time, not crap right there, because when I
yeah,
go to the restroom, I'm in the restroom for a long time. Well, that is often because, sometimes we take our cell phones with us and then we're all of a sudden we're into something else. Well, if the toilet's called the throne, right? Another term for the toilet is the throne. What a better way to identify your time and your life
yeah.
and everything than being on your throne with no other distraction, no magazines,
Nothing.
no
Yeah,
books,
yeah,
just you and your thoughts. Other
yeah.
thing is when you're in the shower, and I'm gonna try this for have you all try this is so often we think about things when we're in the shower, right? We're constantly, oh, what do we got to do today? What do we? I want you to talk to yourself in the shower out loud
Mm,
and identify because a lot of people are like the first time they talk to themselves outside their own head,
yeah.
it feels awkward, and especially if other people are around and could hear or see. And so I say do it in the shower when the water's running, you can't really hear, no one can hear really
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going on, and have a conversation with yourself. What do you want to accomplish with that day? How
yeah.
and you don't have to worry about how it's going to happen as long as you are first focusing on creating that to happen, and then it allows you to start in putting into place your margin and slowing down so that it does happen.
No, that's good.
Those are just off the top of my head that I was thinking of. What do you got?
One of the things that I can think of, yeah, is just saying no this week. So over the course of the next week, like someone comes up and says, hey, can you da da da, like really know where you are, your limits, and just go, what, hey, what, I would love to do this, but right now is not a good time. Can
Right.
I do it XYZ, right? Or create that. That was a moment that I had found with one of my clients working with her. She was always saying yes to things, and she, at the end of the day, she was just exhausted and didn't have anything for her kids. And I'm like, well, how'd your day go? And she was telling me like, oh, this client called and this client called, and I said, did you have to say yes? And she was like, well, no, but da 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 da. And I'm like, well, what would have happened if you just said, hey, I can't meet you today, but how about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? She goes, they
Yes.
probably would have done it.
Yes.
Okay, well, then why don't you just try that, right? And they creating again that margin is like, you know what? I don't have to pack it all in and just say yes to everyone.
Yes. Okay. You just now reminded me of one other tip that I want to share with everyone. Life is caught up with phone calls, especially if you're like in the business world. I have to have multiple phone calls, and I say I have to have. I prefer to have, I guess, because we are in control of our own our own
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
existence. I get to have phone calls to explain things, to dial in things. Communication happens a lot better through actual verbal communication
phone.
rather than text
Mhm.
message or email or all that. Identifying the amount of time in which you are willing and want to spend on the phone with
It's good.
someone when you are setting up a phone call with them or when you get on a phone call with them and be like, okay, I have 5 minutes. At 5 minutes, I'm hanging up. And it's not rude. It is your margin and your healthy boundary
Yeah,
that you are setting for your life. If you don't have a 30 minutes to spend on a phone call, then don't spend 30 minutes on a phone call
yeah,
doing things that you don't really want to do and you're trying to squeeze everything in. That
yeah.
is
Stop
one
the people
one of the
pleasing, right?
yes, people
stop,
pleasing, man.
stop the people pleasing. Yeah.
Yeah. I
That
love
would
it.
give you a lot of margin in your day, I bet you, if you just stop people pleasing and just, it's like, hey, no, man, I'd love to do this right now, but I can't, so I'm not going to just do it just to please them.
Yeah. What you were saying about saying no, right? So like when the
Yeah.
phone call, my phone rings at a time in which my wife is just getting home and the kids are hungry and there's a lot of action going on in my house, the last thing my wife wants me to do is pick up that phone and answer and be like, "Oh yeah, what's going on?" And then all of a sudden get into a
Can be gone
fight.
for a half hour or more.
Exactly. And so once again, identifying what it is that you want. Do you
Yeah.
want a margin in your life with a wife that's happy with you? Or do you want to invest your time into a conversation that is only going to be fueling the fire at your house? And then at what point does that conversation actually bring life into
Yeah.
your own personal life and ventures? So some great insight for this week, and I really can't wait to get into the next chapter that we're getting into, which is silence and awareness.
Yes. Yeah, that's going to be so good. We save, I think, probably the best for last in my mind. And that's stuff that I really dig. And so it was kind of this crescendo effect, right? We just built up to this, and it's going to be a good one.
Yep. And now, depending on how this goes, we might break it into a chapter 4 and a chapter 5, with silence and awareness being a part 1 and part 2. We'll see
Mhm.
when we gets to it. Also, we'd love your feedback. Let us know what you think of the
Yeah.
series, and reach out to Tim. You can reach out to me, the Soulful Hunter. And at the end of the day, it's just about being a better person, to living the life that we
Right.
want to live, and to glorify our Creator the way that
Yes.
we can. Not that we should, that we can, because
Yeah.
everything is a choice. We have free will. If you guys are looking for coaching opportunities and you want to have someone to be a sounding board, to give you different perspective or any of that, go check out Tim at The Inspired Way. Tim, your stuff is always going to be in the show notes, but just for the listeners' sake, go ahead and tell them how to get a hold of you real quick.
Yeah. So my favorite place to hang out is Instagram. So you can find me at Tim Douglas Inspires. And you can always email me, Tim at timdouglasinspires.com. That's my website as well, timdouglasinspires.com. I am on Facebook as well. So just look me up, Tim Douglas, and you'll be able to find me there.
I love it. Guys, be blessed. Be of good cheer. Know that no one is going to make this life better for you except yourself. You have to identify your own soul and your own desires and your own needs and wants before that you can accomplish and do anything else. It starts with us putting one foot in front of the other before we can go on any sort of journey. Be blessed. Be of good cheer, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, freedom on and stay
Stay
soulful.
soulful.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast, as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.